Welcome to Nobilis Erotica, the best science fiction and fantasy erotica anthology podcast in the known universe. This month, Gay Dragons. This is episode 486. I am Chooch Schubert, filling in this month for Nobilis Read. Our author, J Aster, is a queer writer and lover of all things mythic. When they're not writing in cafes over endless cups of black tea, you can find them learning a new art medium, recipe, or language. Sacrifice is their first publication. Our narrator will be me, Chooch Schubert. I'm an audio engineer, musician, podcaster, and Twitch streamer. You can find links to my various projects at chooch.us. Over on the Patreon campaign, our audio presentation of Hallowed Covenant is wrapping up this month, so if you want to get that, you'll need to sign up soon. You can do that at patreon.com/Nobilis. We'll have a new story from Nobilis starting later this summer. And here we go. Sacrifice by J Aster. Screaming and kicking as best he could around a gag and manacles, Leander put up a better fight than anyone had expected. He was certain he broke some teeth and maybe a kneecap before they managed to toss him into the steaming cave opening. "Lord, accept our offering!" Baron screamed into the cave, the trader's words echoing throughout the cavern. "Spare the rest of us!" And then he and the other rats rolled a huge boulder in front of the entrance, sealing him off from them, and sealing him in with whatever the hell was inside the volcano. The room was pitch black and much too hot for comfort. Already he felt like he would suffocate. He shouted and thrashed on the floor in pure anger until he managed to hit his head on something, and then he lay still, contemplating the stupidity that had brought him to this moment. Some his, but mostly those fucking bastards hightailing it down the mountain. "Ah," came a slow voice. "I see they've changed their game." Leander shouted in surprise, at once taking up his thrashing. By God, he wasn't going down without a fight, even if that fight would only consist of writhing on the ground like a worm. "Calm," said whatever it was, probably the monster, God, volcano spirit, whatever was going to eat him. "I'm not going to eat you." That actually did make him pause. "What about," he tried to say, but it came out as muffled grumbling. "Remain calm," instructed the lethargic voice. Fingers brushed his face. Real fingers, he could swear it. And the gag just crumbled away. Leander gasped for breath, gagging and choking briefly on the rush of sulfur that hit his face. "Who? What about?" "Give me your hands." His eyes were slowly adjusting. The person in front of him was a huge black shape, but he could almost make out veins, blood, orange-red rivulets running across his body. "They're behind my back," Leander said. "Who are you?" The being moved behind him and took hold of the cuffs. "This will be hot for a moment, but you will be fine." Before Leander could respond, the cuffs grew searing for a split second and fell from his wrists. "Ow, ow, ow," he hissed, bringing his aching wrist to his mouth. But the creature was right. The pain was already fading. "Who are you?" he demanded again. The being circled back in front of him. His eyes really were adjusting now. The figure was a huge man, perfectly naked. His skin was pitch black, blending into the darkness, dug through with fluctuating red-orange light, the same color as his burning eyes. "My name is Simnus," he said. "I'm the volcano god," showing a red-hot tongue behind coal teeth. "And you, I presume, are my most recent sacrifice. I suppose they thought that when the 9 women didn't work, they'd try a man instead." "Fucking cretins and traitors," Leander hissed. He pulled himself to his feet so the man wouldn't be looking down at him, or at least down at him as much. He only came to the volcano god's collarbone. "Baron was the one to seal me in here, when just last week he was sucking my dick. I'm gonna haunt his ass." "Haunt?" Simnus said mildly, cocking his head. Dreadlocks ran like lava flows down his bare shoulders, shimmering in the darkness. "Yeah, when you eat me," Leander snarled, squaring his shoulders. Simnus laughed gently, and Leander caught another glimpse of that burning tongue. I'm not going to eat you. I already said that. Leander frowned. Then what about the girls? The 9 of them that the town has sent up. If you didn't eat them, where the fuck are they? They're far too busy eating each other, Simnus said, snorting in amusement. It took a moment for the words to click, and when they did, Leander's gaze fuzzed white for a moment. All 9 of them? Simnus held out his arm, and Leander took it without thinking. As soon as his hand touched it, he flinched away, hissing, and then jerked to a confusing halt, staring at his hand. The skin of his palm should have been bubbling and blistering, but it was fine. It didn't hurt, Simnus said, preferring his arm again. Your mind just thinks it should have. Ah. Gingerly, Leander looped his arm through Simnus's. Sure enough, there was no pain. As his mind attempted to rewire its expectations for touching hot surfaces, Simnus started to walk deeper into the cave, and Leander followed him mindlessly. The girls, Simnus continued, I made them all the offer I will make you. Leave or stay. The first despised the thought of returning to her would-be murderers, yet had nowhere else to go, so she stayed. It's a big volcano after all, and what do I need all this space for? The second decided to stay with the first. The third decided to stay with the first 2, and so on. Leander's mouth felt wet. Can I meet them? He asked hopefully. Most likely not in the sense you're implying, Simnus said, amused. They say they'll never have another man again. Oh, that was disappointing, but it was hard for it to register as such when he was on the arm of a massive, naked man who was cradling his arm very delicately. You said I can leave or stay? Indeed, Simnus said. Let me show you my home. Simnus led him out further and deeper into the cave system, and it grew both hotter and lighter. Magma ran in streams alongside them, illuminating the vast tunnels of obsidian that shone and glittered. Leander walked inside the purest heart of fire and was awestruck. He turned to Simnus to say as much and could not speak, for the god was fully illuminated for the first time. He was a man of softest obsidian traced through with rivulets of glowing lava, muscles sculpted and glittering, jewel-dark dreadlocks falling down his back, shimmering with heat. Naked as he was, it was through great force of will that Leander allowed himself just one single glance at his large obsidian cock. Yes? Simnus asked lightly. Leander swallowed. Answer me this. Whether I stay or go, will you eventually destroy the city? Simnus stared at him, shining black brow crumpling in confusion. Destroy the city? Leander stopped walking, and Simnus obligingly stopped with him so that their arms would not unlink. Don't sound so confused, he exclaimed. Did none of the girls tell you why they were sacrificed? We all see the volcano boiling, ready to spill. Simnus looked aghast. I'm just stretching a little. Well, until you stop stretching, you'll have another of me next week. Leander couldn't believe this. He'd been fucked over for nothing. Another of you say? Simnus asked, reaching out to trace a charcoal finger down Leander's face. I think one is enough. Don't you? Leander flushed bright red, meeting his eyes in astonishment as that finger pressed into the divot below his lower lip. After all, I've never actually accepted one of my sacrifices. Oh. Leander's heartbeat thrummed in his chest. Hot arousal flooded through his stomach. He reached up to take Simnus's hand. It took another effort of will to quell his fear of burning, but he managed to do so, and pressed a kiss to the palm of the god's hand. As Simnus watched, eyes smoldering, he let his lips drag across the hills of his knuckles. Well, you know what they say, 10th time's the charm. Simnus smiled slowly and stepped into Leander's space, pressing their chests together. Leander mouthed over the very tips of his fingers, smiling as they curled gently into his bottom lip. Good, Simnus rumbled, the sound vibrating through both their chests. He closed his eyes and took a long breath in, then let it slowly back out, blowing steaming air across Leander's face. The god's entire frame relaxed with his exhalation. Ah, he sighed. The next time they check the volcano, they will know their god was appeased. Oh, Leander said, putting his hand on Simnus's chest and dragging his nails downward. I don't think you're appeased quite yet. Simnus grinned at him with obsidian teeth. If you want me, mortal, it is not so easy as that. Come with me to the pool. Curious and heavy with want, Leander leaned into Simnus's body as the god led him through the corridors, spiraling through gleaming tunnels whose walls were embedded with gems. It was like walking through a night sky. At last, the tunnels opened into a vast, steam-filled cavern. Below the steam was a deep pool filled to waist height with water that perfumed the air. Simnus caressed Leander's face one last time, and then let his arm go. Glancing back over his shoulder with hot eyes, the god waded into the pool. The steam settled on his gleaming skin and made it luminous. He strode to the middle of the pool and then faced Leander again, extending a hand. If you want a god, Simnus said, you must prove your mettle. Come to me, Leander. Leander had been sacrificed in a white shirt and white pants, and the moment they had entered the cavern, they had become transparent and sticky. They left very little to the imagination, but he still made an effort to put on a show as he stripped. And by the way Simnus's gaze stuck to him, he succeeded. Simnus's outstretched hand remained, entreating as Leander stepped up to the waterline. The heat from this pool he could feel. It brushed over his feet like a plume of fire, but it did not burn. This was no mere pool. This was a trial. He looked to Simnus, who was waiting motionless in the pool, and then he stepped into the water. It was hot, so hot his mouth fell open in a gasp. His skin flushed all over immediately. One step had brought him just past ankle-height water, and he froze, staring down at his feet. He almost expected the flesh to be melted off, but he was whole. Join me, came Simnus's voice. He was being boiled inside his own skin as the water crept past his calves, thighs, hips. Finally, tears streaming down his face, he reached Simnus in the waist-high water and seized the god's outstretched hand. The heat disappeared. No, that wasn't right. The heat was there still, but it no longer hurt. It felt soothing, healing, right. Good, Simnus rumbled, bringing his face down to Leander's to rub his smooth cheek along Leander's jaw. You made it. I passed? Leander gasped as Simnus's huge hand closed around his waist and tugged him closer. Oh, yes, Simnus said. Would you like your reward? Leander crowded up against Simnus's chest and tugged his head to the side, taking his lips in a kiss. Simnus's mouth was hot and soft, that burning tongue flickering curious spots of heat along his own. They kissed until Leander was dizzy with it, overtaken by the soft bites pressed against his lips and neck. Truly dizzy, in fact, mind going soft from the heat and the trial. His entire body was exhausted. It was abruptly hard to even keep his fingers curled around Simnus's neck. He broke away and rested his head against Simnus's shoulder. The humidity of his breath shone against Simnus's skin. I feel weak. The god stroked his large hands through Leander's hair. Let me take care of you, he entreated. Let me love you here in this pool. I promise it will be so good. Leander leaned heavily against him, Simnus taking his weight, the water moving around them. He was dizzy and warm and cradled here in this primordial place. Yes, Leander whispered, kissing Simnus's shoulder. I want that. Simnus took his mouth in another deep kiss, and then wrapped Leander's legs around him and began striding farther into the pool, carrying him easily. The further they went, the hotter the water became, and the more loosely Leander felt tied to reality. The heat did not hurt. It sunk him into a deep lethargy, as if he was attuning to something deep in the earth. They reached a prominence in the cavern floor that rose above the pool, and Simnus laid him gently against it. The stone was hotter than the water, and Leander moaned as his back came into contact with it. "Yes, my love," Simnus said. "Feel my heat for you." The god covered him from the front, taking deep, satiating kisses from his mouth, and reached a hand between his legs. Leander spread them, and Simnus stroked his cock as he kissed him, bringing him to hardness, and rolled his balls in a hot hand, finally pressing gentle fingers just against his hole. Leander moaned softly in pleasure, his whole body hot and weak and luxurious. And then those fingers were pushing into him, and Leander was on fire. He lost time between Simnus's kisses and the soft rocking of fingers into his overheated body, slicking him with what was surely lava, until at last Simnus brought his hand to Leander's face with a question on his lips. Leander kissed him in answer, and Simnus slid into him, sending bright bursts of pleasure along his spine. And as Simnus promised, as he began to fuck him, it was good, for there was not one spark of pain, only deep and profound pleasure. Leander was so thoroughly relaxed by the heat, and Simnus was so divinely attentive that neither met any resistance to their lovemaking. Simnus worked him slowly, inexorably thrusting hot and solid into his lax body, and Leander could only moan in satisfaction. When Simnus began to thrust more urgently, he wrapped his fingers around Leander's cock and stroked with hot twists of his hand, and they came together, Leander shuddering in pleasure at the feeling of dual release, his own and Simnus's flooding up inside him in a wave of overwhelming heat, echoed by the humid heat of the pool around them. When they came down from the high, Simnus cradled Leander against his chest, sinking them both into the fragrant water together. "Good as promised, my love," Simnus murmured against his temple. "Worth the heat?" Leander drew him down for a kiss. "I think I'll like being your sacrifice." And that's our story. If you'd like to get an ad-free version of this podcast, head to patreon.com/nobilis. As a supporter, you will have access to a personal RSS feed that you can drop into your podcatcher. And if you want monthly bonus content, bump up your support to $3 a month. Remember to pick up Monster Whisperer Second Class in your favorite ebook retailer or on the Riverdale Avenue Books website. Or pick up the audiobook in Audible, Amazon, or Apple. Your support will help ensure this series continues. You've been listening to the Nobilis Erotica podcast. Theme music is composed and performed by Mass Relay. Background sound is from tabletopaudio.com. Sound effects are from Digital Juice. This podcast is released under a Creative Commons Attribution, Non-Commercial, No Derivatives license. Until next time, listen hard.